It was supposed to be a 6-month assignment, a stepping stone to our future. Instead, it became the blueprint for my dismantling. I watched the love of my life, Clara, board that flight to Singapore with a pride that hurt my chest. 2 years of dating, 1 year of marriage, and everything we built felt like it was crystallizing into the dream we'd sketched on napkins and whispered about at night. She was a force of nature, my Clara, with a mind for business that was both terrifying and magnificent. Supporting her wasn't a choice. It was my purpose. So when a headhunter's call came for a senior strategist role at a booming Asia-Pacific firm, I sold my own aspirations to fuel hers. I took on extra freelance work to cover the loss of her income, handled the visa paperwork she found tedious, and spent nights researching neighborhoods in a city I'd never seen, all to make her transition seamless. The goodbye at the airport was a bittersweet cocktail of loneliness and fierce hope. For the first month, our digital life was a lifeline. Video calls filled with her bright, exhausted eyes as she described the soaring skyline, the intense but rewarding projects, her charismatic direct manager, Daniel. She'd laugh about the cultural quirks, and I'd pretend my days were just as thrilling, editing out the quiet emptiness of our apartment. I was the anchor, she was the ship. I believed that firmly. But then, the tides of communication began to shift. The daily calls became every other day, then weekly. Her texts grew terse, drained of the emojis and pet names that were our shorthand. Busy, talk later became her mantra. When I suggested I fly out for a long weekend, she cited a critical project deadline, her voice edged with a strange panic. "It's not a good time, Alex. Soon, I promise." My unease curdled into dread. I'd lie awake, my mind spinning scenarios of accident or illness. Then, one Tuesday morning, my good morning text bounced back. A little red icon of failure. I called. The number was disconnected. A cold, clinical recording in a language I didn't understand. A frantic check of all her social media showed a digital graveyard. Profiles deleted, photos vanished, our digital union erased with few clicks. It was an annihilation so quiet and complete it left a ringing silence in my soul. I contacted her sister, Jessica, who was evasive, mumbling about Clara needing space to find herself, and that the job was more demanding than anyone knew. I was locked out, treated like a problematic subscriber to a service that was no longer offered. The silence was a physical weight. I vacillated between white-hot anger and a grief so profound it felt like drowning. I considered flying to Singapore, but the address I had for her was the corporate housing I'd helped arrange, and a call to the rental agency confirmed she'd moved out months prior. My emails to her company's generic HR address went unanswered. Her family's wall of vague reassurance finally cracked when I mentioned filing a missing persons report. Her father, voice heavy with shame, begged me not to, assuring me Clara was safe and would explain when she could. So I waited in purgatory, a husband in name only, clinging to the wreckage of vows. The revelation came not with a knock on the door, but with a casual, soul-destroying scroll. A new profile under her maiden name, Clark. And there she was, Clara, radiant in a sundress, standing on a pristine beach, her hand resting on a pronounced bump. The sunset was a cliché of oranges and purples. The man beside her, his arm around her shoulders, was unmistakably Daniel, her boss. His smile was a conqueror's grin. The caption was a knife to the heart. Finding home where you least expect it. My heart is so full. Baby girl coming soon. The date on the post was from 3 weeks prior. She was at least 6 months pregnant. She had been pregnant while telling me she was too stressed with work to talk. She had been building a family while strategically dismantling ours. The world dissolved into a static hum. I felt my knees buckle, hitting the floor of my silent living room. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was logistical calculated fraud. She had been married to me, legally bound to me, while carrying another man's child and planning her new life. The support I'd given, the sacrifices I'd made, they were the fuel for her escape. My friend Ben, usually the calm one, was apoplectic. She's a sociopath, he kept saying. But that didn't capture the intimate horror of it. She knew me, she had loved me, or performed it perfectly. Why wasn't I worth a conversation, a divorce filing, a single moment of honesty? In the crater left by that social media post, I found a strange, cold clarity. My parents, seeing my devastation, advised action over anguish. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Chun. I laid out the facts like a coroner's report: abandonment, financial contribution to her relocation under false pretenses, probable adultery, and the public evidence of a new family while legally married. Miss Chen's eyes hardened. This is more than just ground for divorce. This is marital fraud and constructive abandonment. We filed for divorce on those grounds, and I initiated a separate civil claim for the financial resources I'd expended to support her relocation, funds that had clearly subsidized her new beginning. Gathering the evidence was a surreal exercise in self-flagellation. Every bank transfer for her security deposit, every receipt for the international phone plan I'd upgraded, every email where I'd sent her links to Singaporean prenatal clinics, the irony was savage, became exhibit. I printed the social media post. It felt less like legal preparation and more like building a monument to my own naivete. At work, I became a ghost of productivity, moving through tasks mechanically. A colleague, Rachel, slid a muffin onto my desk with a sticky note. 1 hour at a time. It was the first kindness that didn't feel like pity. The anger was a cleaner fuel than the grief. I started to see the patterns I'd missed. Her growing irritation at my questions about the future, her subtle of our life together as small, her newfound fascination with a wealth and status I couldn't immediately provide. Clara hadn't just fallen out of love. She had executed a calculated upgrade. I was not a partner. I was a launch pad. Just as the divorce papers were being processed and my new, grim equilibrium set in, my phone rang. A Singaporean number. The voice on the other end was a cracked, watery version of Clara's. Alex. God, Alex, please don't hang up. She was sobbing. The fairy tale, it seemed, had a third act written by a sadist. Daniel, the visionary boss, the love of her life, was not what he seemed. His position was a facade. The lavish lifestyle was funded by embezzlement from the very firm that had hired her. The scheme had unraveled spectacularly. He was in custody, assets frozen, and Clara, pregnant and complicit by association, she'd let him use her accounts, was left destitute, investigated, and utterly stranded. The company had terminated her with extreme prejudice. Her visa was in jeopardy. He lied about everything. She wept. I have nothing. No money, no job, no place to go. The baby is due in weeks. Please, can you help me? Just enough to get a ticket home. The silence on my end was not shock, but a profound, almost spiritual assessment of karma. I felt nothing for her. Not rage, not schadenfreude, nothing. Why? I asked, my voice flat. Would I do that? She stammered about our history, about love, about the baby needing a chance. You erased our history, I reminded her. You blocked me, replaced me, and announced your new life to the world while I was still your husband. You didn't need a history then. You don't get to invoke it now. She cried harder, a desperate, ugly sound. I have no one else. My family, they won't answer. I'm scared. You should be, I said. You made a series of terrifyingly bad choices. My responsibility to you ended the moment you decided I was a ghost. Contact your embassy. Contact a social worker. Do not contact me again. Any further communication will go through my lawyer. I gave her Ms. Chen's email and ended the call. I immediately documented the conversation and forwarded the number to my lawyer. The pity I felt was for the unborn child, a passenger on this doomed voyage. The cavalry arrived in the form of Daniel's former assistant, a woman named Priya. Her call was a masterpiece of performative concern. She explained she was trying to help pick up the pieces and couldn't understand how I, given my obvious devotion to Clara, could be so cruel as to abandon her now. She's in a women's shelter, Alex. She's pregnant and alone. Whatever happened between you, doesn't basic human decency dictate some compassion? I let her finish. Priya, I began. Were you the one who covered for their affair? Who lied to HR when they took those business trips to Bali? Who helped craft the narrative of the power couple? She sputtered. I was just doing my job. I didn't know the full. You knew enough. I cut in. And now that the bill has come due, you're doing your job again. Trying to offload the liability onto someone else. Tell me, are you wiring her money? Are you offering her a room in your home? The silence was telling. No, you're just making calls, applying moral pressure where there's no cost to you. That's not decency, Priya. That's moral vanity. I told her that the next time she or anyone from that circle contacted me, I would consider harassment and act accordingly. The line went dead. The audacity was breathtaking. They lived in a world where consequences were for other people. Then came the expected, yet still astounding, call from Clara's mother, Eleanor. The guilt trip was laid on thick. How can you be so cold, Alex? She's a mother of yours. She's carrying a child. A real man would rise above this. Her tone was that of a disappointed aristocrat. Eleanor, I replied, my patience a thin wafer. Where is your maternal rising? Why is your daughter in a shelter across the world if you have a home? Why aren't you wiring her the money? The excuses flowed. Limited fixed income, poor health, the distance. So, I summarized, you expect me, the man she humiliated and abandoned, to show compassion that you, her own mother, won't? What does that say about your family's values? I asked her if this was a pattern. If Clara learned to use and discard people from the best. The line crackled with her indignation. How dare you? I dare because I was the one who was used and discarded. I shot back. You raise a woman who thinks vows are suggestions and people are utilities. Her predicament is the direct result of the character you helped form. If you want to help her, do it, but do not ever call me to clean up a mess you helped create. I ended the call feeling a strange catharsis. I had named the thing, the shamelessness, the utter lack of accountability. It was a virus, and they were all carriers. The dominoes fell with a satisfying final click. Pressure from somewhere, maybe shame, maybe social gossip, finally forced Eleanor to scrape together funds for a one-way ticket. Clara returned home, heavily pregnant and shrouded in scandal. By then, the divorce was final. The court, presented with the timeline and the evidence, had granted it on grounds of adultery and constructive abandonment. Furthermore, they upheld my financial claim. Clara was ordered to reimburse me a significant portion of the relocation costs. It was symbolic victory. I doubted I'd ever see the money, but the larger justice was external. The Singaporean authorities, deep in their investigation of Daniel's fraud, had deposed Clara. Her attempt to paint herself as a clueless victim fell apart under the weight of financial records and her own earlier boastful messages to friends about their empire. She was charged with being an accessory to financial fraud, a lesser charge, but one that carried weight. Her pregnancy delayed sentencing, but did not prevent it. After the birth, a daughter. She was given a suspended sentence, but a hefty fine and a permanent black mark on her professional record. The child was left in Eleanor's reluctant care as Clara scrambled through a series of dead-end jobs to pay her debts. I heard all this through the distant, muffled grapevine of mutual acquaintances. I felt nothing for her. A stark, empty nothing. The child I prayed for, that innocent girl, born into such a web of deceit and selfishness, deserved a fighting chance. But her mother's story was, to me, a closed book written in a language of betrayal I no longer care to decipher. Today, my life is quiet. The silence in my apartment is no longer an accusation. It's a space I fill with my own choices. I took a pottery class, found I had terrible hands for it, but laughed through the mess. I reconnected with old friends on my own terms. I'm in therapy, untangling the knots of trust she left behind, learning that my supportiveness is not a flaw, but that my discernment needed sharpening. I don't hate Clara. Hate would be a connection. I am indifferent, which is the true opposite of love. Sometimes, the lesson isn't about watching karma deliver poetic justice. It's about recognizing that you were a chapter in someone else's toxic story and having the strength to close that book and write your own. Her downfall wasn't my victory. My peace is. I've learned that the most powerful response to betrayal of this magnitude is not revenge, but a life rebuilt so fully and authentically that the betrayal itself becomes a footnote, a harsh but distant teacher. The love I gave was real. Her inability to honor, it was her failure, not mine. And in that realization, I found my freedom.